What if I told you that the greatest empire of antiquity was built on a technology it initially despised? The Egyptian kingdom existed in isolation for thousands of years, relying on its deserts as natural defenses. Their armies were slow-moving, armed with simple clubs and copper axes. But one day their horizon darkened with dust, and a force the Egyptians could not even comprehend descended upon them. The invaders, later called the Hyksos, brought with them a machine that changed the course of history forever. It was not just a means of transportation, but a mobile platform of death, sweeping away everything in its path. The shock of this collision was so great that it nearly wiped Egyptian civilization off the face of the earth. However, instead of perishing, Egypt learned its lesson and turned the enemy's weapon into its main symbol of power. They perfected every screw, every detail, creating the perfect mechanism of war. Watch the video to the end to find out how the Pharaohs' engineers were able to lighten the chariot's construction to the weight of a single man, and why this solution Are you ready for the shocking truth that the Egyptians originally considered the wheel to be a useless toy? Before the arrival of the Hyksos, Egyptian military doctrine was based on hand-to-hand combat and the personal physical strength of soldiers. Battles resembled mass brawls where two walls of shields collided with each other under the scorching sun. The outcome of the battle was determined by endurance and numbers, and maneuvers were extremely limited by the speed of a person on foot. The Egyptians faced an enemy that could attack, retreat, and attack again faster than the infantry could turn around. It was not just a military defeat, it was the collapse of the ideology of static defense. Speed became the new god of war, supplanting traditional reliability and immovability. For the first time in the history of the Nile Valley, distance was no longer an insurmountable obstacle for an army in a single day. Military leaders were forced to learn to think in completely new categories of time and space. Now a flanking attack could be launched in a matter of minutes rather than an hour. The psychological effect of the rumbling of wheels and the neighing of horses was comparable to modern bombing. The infantry, accustomed to seeing the enemy face to face, panicked at the sight of the avalanche rushing towards them. The Egyptian elite quickly realized that survival required a complete rethinking of their mindset and a rejection of old traditions. They had to admit that their great river and deserts no longer guaranteed their safety. War had turned from a ritualistic act into a complex chess game played at tremendous speeds. A new concept was created, where mobility and long-range combat were paramount. Pharaohs, previously depicted as static figures, began to be painted in dynamic poses on chariots. Adapting to the new reality required not only a change in tactics, but also a change in the entire state apparatus. It was necessary to create an infrastructure to maintain a new type of army that had not existed before. This required enormous resources, but the fear of repeated conquest was stronger than the desire for economy. The Egyptians began to copy and then improve the technology of the invaders with fanatical persistence. They dismantled the captured chariots down to the last nut and bolt to understand how they worked. Every detail was studied by the country's best craftsmen with the aim of making it lighter and stronger. As a result, Egypt did not simply adopt foreign weapons. It made them part of its national identity. The chariot became a symbol of the order that the pharaoh brought to the chaos of the surrounding world. It was no longer a weapon of the barbarian Hyksos, but a sacred instrument of Egyptian vengeance. The very perception of the duration of battle changed. Now battles could end in a matter of hours. History has shown that it was precisely the ability to learn from the enemy that saved this civilization from oblivion. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. What do you think about the ability of a conservative society to change so dramatically for the sake of survival? Write about it in the comments. Guess how long it took to create the perfect machine in a country where there are no suitable materials? Egypt is a country of stone, sand, and papyrus, but special types of wood were needed to create a high-tech chariot. Local palm and acacia trees were too soft or brittle to create load-bearing structures that could withstand enormous loads. The Pharaohs' engineers faced a logistical nightmare. They had to import raw materials from thousands of kilometers away. Elm, ash, and birch were delivered from the forests of Lebanon and Syria through a complex trade network. Each piece of wood was literally worth its weight in gold and underwent the strictest selection. The craftsmen developed a unique technology for processing wood using steam and high temperatures. Straight bars were heated and slowly bent, giving them the desired shape without losing the strength of the fibers. This process took weeks and required incredible patience and precision from the craftsmen. An error in the temperature regime could lead to hidden cracks that would only become apparent in battle. The creation of the wheel was the pinnacle of engineering thought at the time. The Egyptians abandoned heavy solid discs in favor of a lightweight spoke design. Initially, wheels with 4 spokes were used, which provided incredible lightness but less reliability. Later, 6 spokes became the standard, providing the perfect balance between weight and structural strength. The wheel rim was assembled from several segments that fit together perfectly. The joints were reinforced with strips of rawhide, which shrunk as it dried and pulled the parts tightly together. This created a structure capable of withstanding impacts from stones at high speeds. The constant shortage of high-quality wood forced craftsmen to use composite methods, gluing different types of wood together. This made Egyptian chariots the most technologically advanced products of their time. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the effectiveness of ancient weapons? The chariot itself was only a means of delivery, while its crew and weapons were the real striking force. The Egyptian crew always consisted of 2 people, a driver and a fighter, who were bound by complete mutual understanding. The charioteer, or kedjen, had to control the horses in the chaos of battle without a shield. His skill lay in providing the fighter with a smooth ride and a favorable angle for shooting. The warrior, or senene, the main weapon of this duo was a composite bow, which was as complex to manufacture as the chariot itself. Unlike a simple wooden bow, the composite bow was glued together from horn, wood, and tendons. The horn on the inside compressed, and the layer of tendons on the outside stretched when tensioned. This created tremendous energy for the shot despite the relatively small size of the weapon itself. Such a bow could pierce leather armor or a light shield at a distance of up to 200 meters. The synchronization of the crew's actions was perfected through years of grueling training at the firing ranges. They learned to understand each other without words, reacting to the slightest changes in the situation. It was this combination, a mobile platform and long-range weapons, that made the Egyptian army a dominant force. Egypt's opponents were unable to find a worthy response to this scorched earth tactic for a long time. Just imagine the horror experienced by the infantrymen when they saw this relentless machine of death. If you enjoy learning about such historical details, don't forget to like this video. What if everything you've been taught about ancient tank attacks is outdated? We're used to seeing chariots crashing into enemy formations in movies, sweeping people away with their wheels and hooves. In reality, the light Egyptian chariots would have been smashed to pieces by such a head-on collision with a dense mass of infantry. Egyptian commanders used a completely different, more sophisticated and cruel tactic. Their goal was not to break through the formation with a blow, but to destroy it with long-range fire and maneuvers. The chariots operated in large groups, rolling towards the enemy in waves but without making contact. They approached to effective firing range, released a volley of arrows, and turned sharply to the side. This maneuver, known as the carousel, allowed them to maintain a continuous rate of fire. The enemy was caught in a hail of arrows, unable to respond or catch up with the attackers. The infantry instinctively huddled together, covering themselves with shields, which deprived them of the ability to maneuver. As soon as the formation was broken and gaps appeared, the chariots rushed into the breaches. Egyptian tactics required vast open spaces, so they tried to impose battle on the plains. If the enemy retreated to the mountains or forests, the effectiveness of the chariots dropped sharply. But on the plains of the Middle East, the Egyptian war machine was unmatched. It was the first implementation of the concept of mobile warfare in history, ahead of its time by millennia. In the next chapter, you will learn how this armada was maintained and how much it cost to maintain one such Ferrari of antiquity. Maintaining a fleet of chariots was an economic challenge comparable to a modern space program. Each combat unit required not only expensive materials. In Egypt, an entire industry of state workshops was created, working exclusively for the needs of the army. The best carpenters, tanners, and blacksmiths worked here, receiving salaries from the royal treasury. Standardization of parts made it possible to quickly replace broken wheels or shafts right in the field. Particular attention was paid to lubricating the axles, as friction was the main enemy of wooden mechanisms at high speeds. Special mixtures of animal fat and oils were used, the recipes for which were kept secret. The lack of high-quality lubrication could lead to the axle catching fire or seizing up in the heat of battle. Therefore, each crew carried a supply of grease in special containers suspended from the hull. But the most expensive part of the system was not the machines, but the horses, which were not native to Egypt. They had to be bred at special stud farms or purchased for huge sums of money in Asia. Horses required high-quality grain, clean water, and constant veterinary care. In a desert climate, providing animals with water during campaigns was a complex logistical task. Wagons with water and fodder stretched for kilometers, following the army. The harness was also a high-tech product, designed so as not to compress the animal's airways. The Egyptians invented a new yoke system that transferred the load to the horse's shoulders rather than its neck. This allowed the animals to run faster and longer without suffocating under the weight of the chariot. Leather straps were regularly lubricated and checked for strength, as a broken harness meant death for the crew. All this required the labor of thousands of people who never saw the battlefield. In peacetime, chariots were stored in special arsenals with controlled humidity and temperature. The wheels were removed from the axles and suspended so that they would not deform under their own weight. Each element of the structure was checked by quartermasters, who kept strict records of state property. The loss or damage of a chariot due to negligence was punished most severely. It was a system of total control.
We require 2 new bronze hubs by next week.
The cost of a single chariot with a team of horses was equal to the income of a peasant family for several generations. Therefore, only members of the nobility or the state could own and drive them. This created a huge financial burden on the economy, but the pharaohs were willing to incur these expenses. Chariots guaranteed the safety of trade routes and the flow of tribute from conquered lands. The war economy worked at full capacity, ensuring Egypt's technical superiority. Chariots were also used as elite transport for messengers, ensuring rapid communication within the vast empire. The speed of information transfer became another advantage of this technology. A system of horse-changing stations allowed messages to cross the country in a matter of days. This connected disparate regions into a single entity, controlled from the center.
A glorious victory, truly. The Hittites.
What large companies hide today, the pharaohs hid thousands of years ago through art. The Battle of Kadesh between the Egyptians and the Hittites became one of the most documented battles of antiquity. Ramses II ordered scenes of his great victory to be carved on the walls of all the major temples of Egypt. In these reliefs, he is depicted as a giant on a chariot, single-handedly trampling his enemies. The chariot here acts as a pedestal of divine power, elevating the king above mere mortals. However, the historical reality was much more prosaic and dangerous for the pharaoh himself. Egyptian intelligence failed, and Ramses' army fell into a carefully planned Hittite ambush. The Hittite heavy chariots, each carrying 3 men, crushed one of the Egyptian corps on the march. The pharaoh found himself cut off from the main forces surrounded by enemies with only his personal guard. It was at this critical moment that the speed and maneuverability of the Egyptian chariots played a decisive role. Ramses and his guards were able to organize a counterattack, breaking through the ranks of the more cumbersome Hittite machines. The light Egyptian chariots turned on the spot, evading the ramming attacks. They shot at the Hittite crews, who were excellent targets due to their size. The Egyptians used their advantage in ranged combat, not allowing the Hittites to impose close combat with spears. It was a clash of two different design schools and tactical concepts. Salvation came with the arrival of the Reserve Corps, which also moved at great speed on chariots. The sudden strike of fresh forces on the Hittite flank turned the tide of the desperate battle. The Hittite chariots, bogged down in battle and losing momentum, became easy prey. Many of them overturned while attempting to retreat quickly across the Orontes River. The battle ended in a strategic draw. The pharaoh's chariot was not just a fighting machine, but a true work of art, covered in gold and enamel. It was meant to shine in the sun, instilling awe in the hearts of enemies and his own soldiers. Even the horses of the royal team had lavish decorations and plumes of ostrich feathers. This made the pharaoh the most visible figure on the battlefield, which required enormous personal courage on his part. Being in plain sight meant being the main target for all enemy archers. The Battle of Kadesh showed the limits of chariots and large-scale clashes between superpowers. It became clear that even the most advanced technology could not guarantee victory without competent intelligence. But the image of the pharaoh on his chariot was forever etched in the minds of the people as a symbol of protection. The propaganda worked so effectively that we still perceive this battle through the eyes of Ramses. The walls of the temples are silent about the panic and mistakes, but they shout about the greatness of the chariots.
Steady, my chariots.
The Battle of Megiddo, led by Thutmose III, is a textbook example of the use of chariots. The pharaoh decided to take a risk by choosing the narrowest and most dangerous gorge of Aruna to approach the city. His generals begged him to abandon this plan, as the horses and chariots could get stuck in the narrow passage. In such a position, the army would be defenseless against an attack from above or an ambush. But Thutmose counted on the fact that the enemy would not wait for him where it was impossible to pass. The Egyptian army accomplished the impossible. The soldiers dismantled the chariots and carried them on their hands through the narrowest sections. The horses were led by the reins, maintaining strict silence so as not to reveal their presence. It was a logistically incredibly complex operation that required iron discipline. Emerging from the gorge onto the plain in front of the city, the Egyptians quickly reassembled their chariots and formed a battle line. The sudden appearance of an entire army of chariots right under the enemy's nose caused shock. The coalition of Canaanite kings had been waiting for the Egyptians on the wide roads, leaving their rear virtually unprotected. When the Egyptian chariots attacked in the morning, spreading out in a fan shape across the valley, the swift strike overturned the enemy flanks, and the Canaanites fled to the city walls, abandoning their gold and silver chariots. The panic was so great that the city's defenders closed the gates, and the fugitives had to be dragged onto the walls by their bound clothes. Thutmose personally led the attack in his gleaming electrum chariot, setting an example for his troops. His swift breakthrough into the center of the enemy formation disrupted the coalition army's command structure. Egyptian archers shot at those running away, turning the battlefield into a shooting range. However, greed played a cruel joke on the Egyptians. The soldiers rushed to plunder the rich enemy camp instead of storming the city on the shoulders of the retreating enemy. This allowed Megiddo to close its gates and withstand a long siege. Nevertheless, the spoils captured were enormous. Hundreds of enemy chariots, thousands of horses and sets of armor. This trophy park allowed Egypt to further strengthen its army with the technology of its neighbors. The battle showed that chariots were effective not only in the field, but also as a tool of strategic surprise. The ability to quickly switch from marching order to battle order became a decisive factor. Megiddo cemented Egypt's status as a regional superpower for many decades. Thutmose III went down in history as the Napoleon of the ancient world, largely because of this risky maneuver.
Forward!
Chariots allowed him to control vast territories by quickly moving forces to suppress rebellions.
Steady, Merianu! Hold the line!
The introduction of chariots led to profound social changes in Egyptian society. A new military aristocracy emerged, known as the Merianu, young heroes. These were people whose lives were completely devoted to war and serving the pharaoh. Owning a chariot required not only wealth, but also a specific lifestyle that was inaccessible to ordinary farmers. From early childhood, future charioteers were taught horse riding. The Marianu received extensive landholdings and slaves from the pharaoh to provide for their equipment. They were exempt from taxes and ordinary duties.
Harvest is bountiful for the pharaoh.
Their status was higher than that of scribes or mid-level priests, which was unheard of in ancient Egypt. The chariot became a marker of membership in high society, much like a private jet today. Even in the tombs of the nobles, chariots began to be depicted so that they could use them in the afterlife. The training of a charioteer was a cruel and exhausting process that weeded out the weak. They had to be able to shoot with both hands, control horses with their voice and body weight. Regular reviews and competitions were held, where the best received gold awards. Gold of Valor. This encouraged constant improvement of skills and healthy competition within the elite. The pharaoh personally knew the commanders of his chariot troops and entrusted them with the most responsible missions. The emergence of this class of professional soldiers strengthened central power, giving the pharaoh a loyal power base. The Marianu were personally loyal to the king, as all their wealth depended on his mercy. They became a counterweight to the influence of the old tribal nobility and priesthood. The army became a social ladder where a talented warrior could rise to the heights of power. Many future pharaohs, such as Horemheb and Ramses III, came from the ranks of chariot commanders. The Marian culture glorified aggression, speed, and personal skill, which was reflected in the literature of the time. Poems described the beauty of running horses and the brilliance of weapons.
The Merianu's skill is unmatched.
This created an attractive image for young people who dreamed of fame and fortune. But behind the glitter of gold lay hard work and a high risk of death at a young age. Broken bones from falling off chariots were a common occupational hazard.
We must keep moving.
Nothing lasts forever, and the dominance of chariots began to wane as the conditions of warfare changed. The main enemy of the Egyptian military machine was not another army, but geography and new tactics.
We can't move it. The path
When
is too
Egypt
narrow.
attempted to expand its influence into the mountainous regions of Anatolia and Canaan, chariots lost their advantage. Rocks, narrow paths, and steep slopes rendered them useless and vulnerable.
The chariots are useless in these passes. We cannot advance this way.
We must rely on the infantry.
The emergence of
to
the
secure
Sea
river
Peoples
crossings
dealt
first.
a crushing blow to traditional chariot warfare tactics. These invaders fought on foot, using long swords and javelins, and operated in a scattered formation. They were not afraid of chariots, but attacked the horses. Their tactics were aimed at creating chaos in which organized chariot units lost control. Light infantry, capable of moving quickly over any terrain, became an effective counterweight to expensive machines. The development of metallurgy and the advent of cheaper iron weapons made it possible to arm large numbers of infantry. The chariot remained a weapon of the rich, while the iron sword leveled the playing field. The economic efficiency of warfare shifted in favor of infantry. The loss of a single chariot and trained crew was an irreparable tragedy. In addition, the first horsemen appeared, fighting on horseback without chariots. Cavalry was much more mobile, passable, and cheaper than chariot. Although full-fledged cavalry would appear later, the first experiments already signaled the decline of the chariot era. A horse without a chariot could go where a wheel would get stuck. This forced military strategists to rethink their doctrines. Egypt, conservative in its traditions, clung to chariots longer than others, which was one of the reasons for its decline. The pharaohs did not want to give up the symbol of their greatness. Chariots increasingly became ceremonial transport and a means of transportation for the nobility. In later periods, they were used mainly for reconnaissance and communication, rather than as the main striking force.
Forward to glory. Draw your bow.
Egyptian chariots left behind a legacy that goes far beyond ancient history. They were the first example of a complex military system combining technology, logistics. For the first time in history, humanity saw that the outcome of war could be decided not only by brute force, but also by engineering genius. The principles of standardization of parts and mass production applied by the Egyptians. The chariot forever changed the speed of warfare and communication. The world became smaller as armies could cover distances faster than ever before. This contributed to the creation of the first true empires, uniting different peoples and cultures. The exchange of ideas and technologies accelerated thanks to the roads built for chariots. The globalization of the ancient world began with the clatter of wheels on the rocky roads of the Middle East. The image of a warrior on a chariot became deeply rooted in human culture, becoming the archetype of the victorious hero. From the races at the hippodromes of Rome to the triumphal arches of Europe, we see echoes of the Egyptian tradition everywhere. The chariot became a symbol of technological progress and the human desire to conquer space and time. Even the very concept of an arms race has its origins in the rivalry between the chariot powers of the Bronze Age. The Egyptians showed how important it is to learn from your enemy and adapt other people's ideas to your own needs. Their ability to turn the threat of the Hyksos into their own strength is a lesson in statecraft. They did not reject new technology out of pride, but perfected it. This pragmatism allowed their civilization to survive for thousands of years. The invention of the lightweight spoked wheel was a revolution in mechanics, the impact of which we still feel today. The principles of load distribution and the use of composite materials are used in modern mechanical engineering. Ancient craftsmen, without knowing the formulas, intuitively discovered the laws of physics that still work today. We have come a long way from the first clumsy carts to perfect war machines that struck terror into the entire civilized world. Egyptian chariots were not just weapons, they were a philosophy, a way of life, and a symbol of an era. They proved that speed and maneuverability can defeat superior numbers and brute force. The story of their rise and fall mirrors the history of human civilization itself. Now that you know all the secrets of these ancient machines, will you look at images of the pharaohs differently? What detail impressed you the most? The use of steam to bend wood. Write your thoughts in the comments because history is alive as long as we discuss it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journeys into the past, where we will reveal even more forgotten technologies.